Hi, welcome to French Touch Design. Today I am going to share some tips on making an inlay epoxy table from a walnut slab. I bought this black walnut slab for $70 to make two end tables to match an existing coffee table. First, I built a small frame to be able to cut the best parts of the slab. The frame is very easy to move around, and I can already picture how these two tables are going to look. After drawing lines, I use my small Makita power saw. I love this tiny saw. You are going to see throughout my videos that you don't need fancy tools, just basic stuff. I was able to get one full-sized end table from one end of the slab. Now I am going to glue the scraps together to build the second one. I am trying to match the wood grain the best I can. I always keep the frame around. I am missing a tiny piece. I am just trying to match the dimensions and looks with the other end table. I am using the last scrap of wood. I need to be more or less symmetrical. I use a clamp to make sure the joints are straight. I don't have a biscuit joiner to do that, but I do have a small router. I am using this small router bit, which is going to do the job just fine. Always attach the pieces with clamps. It's easier to use the router and be focused only on pushing down and against the edges. It's even better than a biscuit joiner. It's faster too. Now I use my table saw to cut two small strips of wood, or baguettes. The dimensions are equal to the thickness and depth of the router bit. The two strips must easily slide inside the grooves. I still need to add yellow glue. If I don't have enough space inside the grooves, it's going to be a struggle clamping the pieces together. I use yellow glue. For people who don't know, when yellow glue is dry, it's unbreakable. It's extremely strong. Always have everything ready before gluing the top. Clamps, water, sponge, space. So clamp it and clean up with water. When it's dry, I cut the edges just using a metal square and clamps. Then I built a template with white melamine. I am reusing and recycling old melamine all the time from previous projects. I always try not to cut the melamine. I am drilling on top of the edges of the melamine. I use 3/4 inch pine to support the maple inlay. It's light, easy to work with, strong and takes the epoxy very well. I cut the pine to adjust around the black walnut. I also use pin nails to hold the pine in the template. For the design of the inlay, I am choosing Greek corners. Also, I am going with the flow of the design. Next, I built a quick template to cut grooves inside the walnut. I usually attach plywood with 2 screws. There are no clamps in your way, and it's very stable. If you want, you can use clamps too. I cut the maple with my table saw. I also cut small pieces of plywood to create a template for the inlay for 2 reasons. First, I have poor vision, and second, it's perfectly symmetrical with this method. To attach the inlay, I use yellow glue and pin nails to attach to the pine. Again, it's extremely strong when dry. When dry, I remove the black walnut slab. I prep the melamine template with wax and caulking. It's easy and quick to apply. It dries quickly too, in 30 minutes, more or less. After, I use a generous amount of wax with just a tiny bit of mineral spirits poured into it. You also need a rag to spread the mixture. It's easy, cheap and fast. It works great so that the epoxy doesn't stick. I reinstall the wood slabs inside the template and attach them with screws. The advantages are great. No clamps in your way. Edges are tight along the side. It's epoxy time. I use epoxy and concentrated black stain. It's the most powerful stain I ever used so far. It's crazy how deep black it is. It's awesome. Just read the instructions. It's extremely easy. Mix it for 2 to 3 minutes. The only thing is to use a piece of wood around the inside edge of the bucket to make sure it's mixed well. Watch how I do it in a future video. My advice is to walk away from the epoxy. You have plenty of time to set up your template. First thing is to make sure it's level. That's very important. Remember, it's like water when you pour epoxy. You can use shims to adjust underneath the template to be perfectly level. Although, I forgot to protect my floor in my office. I've never had any leaks, but don't forget like me. Just use a plastic top. You never know. Now, you can pour the epoxy. I'm going to show you some different examples. One side has no caulking on top of the slab, and the other slab has caulking around the edges. Why? Because epoxy shrinks when dry. When you have caulking around the edges, you can pour 2 to 3 mm higher than your slab. So, when the epoxy is dry, everything is more or less the same level. In my case, I need to order more epoxy, so no big deal. For the second pour, I have to sand the epoxy with 220 sandpaper. Usually, you can pour the second coat after 8 hours. Pour the second coat. Walk away for 72 hours, minimum. But I always wait a week to be safe. Now, for flattening the slabs. I met Blake when I bought the slab, and he told me about his CNC. So, to save time, I'm paying him to do the job. $80 for both tabletops. It's reasonable. I will explain in the next videos how to do it by hand. So let's move on. Now my slabs are flat. I cut the edges to clean them up. Again, in the next video I will go through the details of sanding and finishing. I always sand the edges with 80, 120, and then finally 180 sandpaper. After I sand the top using 80, 120 and then 180. For the epoxy I use 400. When I'm done with the sanding, I clean the top with mineral spirits. For the epoxy, I use super glue to fill the small pinholes in the epoxy. It's quick and strong. For the bigger holes in the wood, I use this black stick from the brand Mohawk. When the stick is cold, it feels like a stone. You just need a putty knife and a blowtorch. Heat the putty knife and melt the stick inside the holes. I use a razor blade to remove the extra material. You sand and voila! Again, in the next video, I will go into details about finishings. It's 50% of the job. It's very important. I remove dust with mineral spirits and a rag so it will be ready for oil. I am using Seal Oil Semi-Gloss. It's from the store Woodcraft. A lot of people are using Rubio Monocoat. I think it's a great product too. I used it in Europe a long time ago. It's easy to apply and very strong. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think the sheen is satin with no other options available. I didn't do any research on it, so feel free to do it yourself and then let me know in the comments. I want to try something shinier. I used a foam brush and that's it. On the first coat, be generous with the oil. Let it dry overnight. When it's dry, sand with a sponge or 400 sandpaper. It will do the job. Apply a second coat. Let it dry overnight and do the same process over again. For the last coat, sand again and finish with steel wools 4 zeros. You will have the best result. Again, I will go through the details next time, but it's very simple. You will need 4 coats minimum. The con is that it takes a long time to dry. The pros are that it is easy to apply and there is a stunning result. I could not be happier. Fantastic. Okay, so see you soon guys. Thank you.